freedom of speech. There are many people who really don't understand our government at all. They may not have even heard of the Constitution and amendments and the Bill of Rights. But one freedom that most people kind of think they know about is freedom of speech. However, there are many misconceptions about the freedom of speech. For example, you don't have the freedom to say whatever you want, when you want, how you want. There are many, many examples where if you say something that harms someone else, that hurts someone else, you can and will be punished for it. So first, let's make clear what the freedom of speech is. The freedom of speech is the right to say whatever you want without being punished by the government. And the main reason why that freedom is important for the survival of our government, our republic, is that people can't be afraid to speak against the government. If people are afraid to say negative things about the government, then things like civil disobedience, Rosa Parks would never happen because people would be too afraid of the consequences for saying what they feel. Forget about acting, forget about civil disobedience, just saying they don't like something about the president. Imagine what life would be like if you could be punished for that by the government. Well, you can't, because that is what freedom of speech is, and that is how it protects our government, allows us to make changes in the government, allows us to be engaged citizens in the government by voicing our problems with the government. Another reason why freedom of speech is so important is because without freedom of speech, there are other rights that would be sacrificed in the process. If we don't have the right to say what we want against the government, then we would also not be able to petition the government. That means sue the government to say, hey, my rights are being violated. You need to stop that, or you need to help protect me. Also, the freedom to assembly. The freedom to gather together in groups and discuss how you feel. Because if you can't even talk about how you feel, how are you going to convince others or relate to others with the same problems to take action like civil disobedience? So freedom of speech allows freedom of petition, freedom of assembly, which allows us to participate in government as a group. As an individual, you are powerless. As a group, however, you have quite a bit of power. The government is not afraid of individuals. It's very afraid of large groups of individuals. And that goes back to that idea in Unit 1 of engaged citizenship. Joining a protest, discussing with your neighbors in your community things that you see wrong in your community. And they don't have to be big things like Jim Crow laws. They could be small things like litter or pollution or crime or animals out in the streets. These are all examples of engaged citizenship because you're actually taking a role in making a change in your community. What freedom of speech is not is the ability to say what you want to each other. So you can say, I don't like the president, and the president can't punish you. A police officer can't punish you. But your boss can, okay? You don't have the freedom to say what you want to your boss and be like, it's a free country. I can say what I want. It's America. No. The president can't do anything to you, but your boss can fire you. Your boss can fire you because you said you like puppies and he hates puppies. You don't have the freedom protected by the government to say whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. Other citizens can embarrass you, fire you, punish you for saying things that they don't like, that hurt their feelings, that are offensive to them. You don't have that freedom. The freedom of speech is mostly just a protection for you when you want to affect change in the government, but not your neighbor. However, even your freedom to speak out against the government isn't 100% guaranteed. There are some limitations. People may not speak or print or publish words that you can prove hurt someone else, or if they're a threat to national security. Those are the two major limits on the freedom of speech and the freedom of press in the newspapers and social media and the blogs. The most recent modern day example of freedom of speech that's punishable by the government in regards to national security is Edward Snowden. A few years back, Edward Snowden was a highly ranked agent of the federal government, and he had access to a lot of government secrets, and he published them, released them to the world at large, including many of America's enemies. Now, on one hand, those classified documents revealed to Americans that we were being spied on by our own government. The government was listening to our phone calls and our emails and recording all of them and keeping them and storing them in government databases. And Americans had no idea this was happening, and this is absolutely in violation of our right to privacy. But he also revealed documents that had national security information that had to do with enemies of America. So that is why many Americans, many leaders want him on trial for treason. And if that were to happen, if they ever caught him, because he escaped the country and last I heard he was living in Russia, they could remove his citizenship, which is normally a very hard thing to do. Your citizenship gives you a lot of rights and protections and freedoms, but it can be removed from you if you violate one of three things. Because one thing you need to understand about the American legal system is that lying is not just a bad thing, it's an illegal thing. That is a very quick way to go to jail or have very harsh fines imposed upon you, is lying to the government. Do not ever lie to the government. And there's a couple different categories of lies. One lie is libel. Libel is a published false statement. So this wouldn't count speeches. This would count something that you put on Facebook. This would be something that if you put it into a newspaper or magazine, something you typed up and published for others to read, but what you published was not true and damaged someone else's reputation. So if I were to write a news article that said, hey, the president is best friends with terrorists and they play golf on Sundays, that's not true. And that would damage the president if people believed that, because that could very much harm his reputation as someone who's trying to fight terrorism. So that would be an example of libel, and the president could sue me for that, even though he is the government. Another type of lie is slander, which is the same thing as libel, except for instead of published, it's spoken. So I didn't write it, I didn't type it, but maybe I recorded a video of myself, or I just got up and started telling people things that are not true and that make someone else look bad. That can also be punished by the government. I could be sued for doing that. So could you. That's slander. That's a defamatory statement. Defamatory means it brings someone's reputation down, but it's spoken, not written, not published. Because we don't want the people to have the freedom to abuse their rights, because our rights are supposed to protect us, not hurt us, even from each other. Another example of where our rights can be limited in regards to freedom of speech is students. Students' freedom of speech on the internet is limited when they're using the internet on school-owned devices and school-owned internet. Students can express themselves freely, but only on their own personal off-campus computers on their own time. If they're using any school resources at all, and the school decides that what that student is saying or typing is harmful to the education process, it's a distraction to other students, then the school has every right to censor, to limit, to block that speech. The Supreme Court supported this limit on student speech in 1988 in a Supreme Court case known as Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer, in which the Supreme Court said that schools must have the ability to set standards for student speech and limit that speech if it might cause a disruption for other students. So as a student, and not just in high school, even as an adult in college, schools can limit your speech if it's a disruption and if you made that speech or typed that essay or typed that blog using school resources. And that's all there is to know about freedom of speech for now. If you have any questions, please ask me.